Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It is Patrick here, Eggnog Poker. Going to be doing a new video today, and I have not published a new video for probably about 4 weeks or so. So it's been a little while, hasn't it? It certainly has been a while indeed. We've been doing more Twitch streaming, which has been fun, and I will give the link in the description below. As always, thank you quickly just to everyone on the Discord, everyone on the YouTube, everyone on Twitch, and so on and so on. Everyone who's been supporting all my content and following and joining in, etc. The community is ever growing, and I'm very thankful to everybody. Just quickly, just a bit of an update. So in terms of the YouTube content, we still have a few boxes to tick, don't we? I want to just confirm that we still need to do the rest of the mini series is. So for example, the 2NL to 200, we have still got to do 25, 100 and 200, so they will be coming. I have not forgotten about those. They are still to come. I have not been doing much YouTube work over the last couple of weeks, so apologies for that for everyone who has been looking forward to them. They are still coming. Absolutely they are. And we also will be doing a few more bits and bobs with the PokerStars micro stakes series, where we're basically sort of seeing how well we can well we can get on, how high a big blind per 100 we can get, and just having a bit of fun with consistent content. That will never stop running. I will be updating that ASAP, so do stay tuned for those. I know I have been neglecting my YouTube duties recently, so I promise you they have not been forgotten, and they will be being updated for you. But in general, we will be doing a lot more Twitch work. I'm going to be in the next week or two, I'm going to have a proper schedule where I'm going to be Twitch streaming. I'm planning to stream up to 30 or 40 hours a week minimum over 4 or 5 days. We'll see what the routines will look like, but they will be posted on my Discord. Again, all the information will be in the description below, as will the Twitch link and the Discord itself as well. So all that aside, so what is today's video? Why am I doing this? What is this? So this is somewhat of a rant to begin with. So as I've started streaming, okay, my main stakes are not 2NL and 5NL, thank God. But like those stakes that I've started to stream are just on a fresh bankroll. So I started on $25. I don't know, we're up to like 170 or something at this point. We peaked 210, something like that. We're on a little bit of a downswing, but we are coming back into it fiercely. I am absolutely disgusted with how appalling these stakes have become. And I'm actually somewhat disappointed because I thought PokerStars was tight as hell, but apparently the GG is even worse. And I'm downright disgusted, I think is probably the best way to say it. So I had to come back in. So I love GTO and I love studying and I love applying. However, unfortunately, I have to read my own rulebook again and absolutely just apply way more sort of ridiculous death exploits as possible to even remotely have a chance at beating probably 95 of the population, not because they are strong or aggressive competition, but more because they are playing something equivalent to short deck in No Limit Hold'em, as in they have basically eliminated, even more than short deck, I think they've eliminated the deuce through nines in the deck, and their pre-flop through to river execution is just so nutted. I have never seen something as outrageous as what I have seen over the last like sort of 20 hours or something of streaming over the last couple of weeks or something like that. Don't get me wrong, like they are beatable and we're doing pretty well and we're not running very good, but at the same time I probably could have been doing a much better job at sort of folding ridiculously good hands. Regardless, we are climbing out pretty fast and furious, and we're having fun doing it, kind of. But I felt compelled, with my honor as a human being, if nothing else, to help you along the way and to get out of this absolute crock of shite that is like 2NL and 5NL on GG Poker. I am outraged at how appalling everyone is playing in terms of their VPIP PFRs. I have never in my entire life looked at this many people with a PFR and a VPIP under 10. I have never ever encountered anything like it. Don't get me wrong, super high rake environment. Don't get me wrong, it's a tight environment. You don't want to start splashing around and spewing all over the place. However, never again, if you watch this video, should you ever have an excuse to play that fucking ridiculous 12, 11, 3 thing that you call a set of HUD stats. So what I'm going to do is, for the better or for the worse, is I want to educate you. I want you at home, if you are a struggling micro stakes or low stakes player, I want you to literally use this document here, listening to some fucking Papega rant for like another 30 or 40 minutes. But it's going to absolutely just get you out of those shit-stained levels and show you how you can get out and how you can exploit them and what kind of parts of actual game theory you can apply. You don't have to spend millions and millions of hours studying. You don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds of hours thinking about exploits. There's just a very, very serious set of skills that you need to identify and apply into your games. And this will apply at technically any stake, really, but it's a little bit more emphasized at the micros in terms of how often you're doing them and why you're doing them, if anything. So what I'm going to do is, again, I appreciate this is probably going to be a longer video than it will probably want to, than most people will want to see. They just want to see their 10-15 minute highlight videos and shit like that, and God knows what else poker has become these days. However, if you actually want to get the fuck out of these shitty low stakes and you cannot do it, and you think that the world is against you and there's no hope at the end of the world, at the end of the tunnel, there is light and there is hope. I'm not coming in with a magic stick. I have not got a fucking broomstick. I don't go to work with a cape on and a wizard hat. However, I can show you the way. But just don't fucking be 5-5-5-1 or God knows what I saw the other day. Like some of these HUD stats are outrageous. Anyway, so in the next sort of 30 or 40 minutes, I guarantee that you will be a better player immediately, right off the bat, if you follow this. Now, some of this to some extent has already been mentioned in some of the previous videos I did. I'm not looking to like sit here and do tons and tons of these forever. That's not the point or purpose of this YouTube channel. It's generally for just kind of fun, interesting content and updated content over and over again. I did these at the beginning and I don't really need to regurgitate the same thing. I've updated, however, some of those lists, okay? If you want to go back and look for the previous stuff I did, then I'll leave that up to you. You can, I'll use that as part of my clickbait for you to look through all my videos and find those. I'm not going to do that for you. However, this updated list is pretty damn good, and considering it is free, excuse my language, but it's pretty fucking good. I'm not going to lie, considering it's absolutely free and just ta-da, here it is. Like, how can I improve? And it's none of this bullshit like, just play the nuts and just fold everything and just wait for the nuts and then just do this and it's really easy and all you have to do is wait for a set and then you check raise and all you have to do is just have top pair, top kicker and 3-bet, and have ace king and 3-bet pre and wait for sets and wait for top 2 and just have the nuts and then fold, 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 fold. There is some of that to an extent, but it's not about being a fucking disgusting nit. It's about being an extremely aggressive machine, but identifies when it actually needs to go back into human mode and just get the hell out of there when a nit absolutely has it 9 times out of 10. And for better or for worse, there is nothing else to say. It's just, we need to change the way, like 8 or 9 minutes, and I have not even got to the first bullet point. That is how fucking angry these stakes have made me so far. Just a disclaimer, like, we're still crushing those stakes, and if you watch any of my content on YouTube or Twitch, you will see that we are actually winning players over these sites and over these videos as well. So if you want to backseat me, go ahead, but like, I do actually genuinely know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm not sitting here pretending. I'm not saying I'm some absolute cyborg. However, we're trying to get there. We're doing our best to get there. Anyway, so what actually are the secret magic rules to the magic wild formula out of the laboratory to just become a good player? Well, actually, it's just, I'll be honest with you, it's common fucking sense, to be quite honest with you, okay? Let's be honest, the first and most important part of any of this is to identify and understand what the fuck your population is doing. If you're playing 2NL, you're playing 5NL, you're playing 10NL, you're playing 16NL, you're playing 25NL, there is a cutoff point, okay? All of those stakes equals nit. It equals Astro Whale. It equals bad tight ABC reg, and maybe 0.2 of the population is someone remotely close to having 10% of a fucking brain. And when I say that, I mean people who actually might check raise you and not just have a set. I mean someone who may check raise you and may actually have a draw. I mean someone who may barrel the turn and they just have a flush draw. I mean someone who may go all in on the river and guess what? They won't win. They are so far between to find those types of players. I don't know. They're just nit-infested shitholes. Excuse my language, but rant necessary. Okay, so you need to identify. This is the most obvious thing on the planet. If you have HUD stats, or if your site has HUD stats for you, so this will not be viable to somewhere else, guess like Ignition, for example, or whatever. But in general, if you do have the HUD stats, so like GG have their own default ones, and then if you're playing, I don't know, like PokerStars or whatever, ACR, you can use Tracker and Hold'em Manager and God knows what. You need to identify who you're playing against, right? You need to profile your player. You need to say, I've got 500 hands on this guy. I can see that this guy is opening something like, in general, like 10% of hands. I know this guy's opening 15% of hands. I know he's raising 20% of hands. Do you see what I'm saying? If you want to go more specific, great. You can say under the gun, he's opening X amount of hands. But in general, if we're looking at a VPIP PFR combo and there's something like 14-11, that guy's probably a filthy fucking nit. And he's probably got an extremely fucking good range of hands. Don't go after him. Just have it. Literally have it. And get the pot small, get him post. We're going to look at all the bullet points specifically. But just generally, don't pay these fucking idiots. They are sitting there for 5 hours waiting for a set to check raise you. They're waiting for queens to 3-bet you. They're waiting for ace-king to 3-bet you. They're probably even flatting ace-king 90% of the time anyway. If you're versing someone who looks remotely competent, if you're looking at versing someone who's actually looks like they might be somewhat aggressive, for better or for worse, you can start playing a little bit more normal. Literally, I'm not going to call it GTR, I'm not going to call it strategy, I'm just going to call it normal. As in, you can actually play anything that isn't just nutted to continue to the turn. Okay? But you need to identify, are you against ABC Regs? Are you against a Spewy Whale? Are you against an Aggro Maniac? Are you against a very tight, or just ridiculously nitty, weak player? Which one is it? Like, you have to identify it, because your whole strategy is literally just, I know this guy is wildly underbluffing. Okay, great, we'll fold loads. There you go. That's the magic formula. You're against someone who's over aggressive in most spots. Great. Well, we'll have to hold on a bit more. That's a magic formula. It's not rocket science, and there's a little bit more to it than that. But in general, you can't just say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z because a solver says. You can't do X, Y, and Z because fucking Charlie Carroll told me. You can't do X, Y, and Z because some fucking poker course told me. You cannot do X, Y, and Z because this retard with an Under Armour hat and a hoodie that says life is blef is telling me to start check raising rivers. It's depending on who your villain is and your population tendencies. If you're playing 1k NL, if you're playing 200 NL, if you're playing 10 NL, there's probably slight differences to the quality of the regular player. But fish will remain fish at any stake that they play, okay? So you need to kind of like start looking at who you're playing. I mean, any idiot can say that, right? I can sit here and clickbait and just say, you just have to play a profile and play tight versus, bluff the nits when they're checking and be careful and don't pay them and blah, blah, blah. It's obvious, but it's somewhat overlooked. It's just literally, there it is in front of you. You're at a 1-2 table in a casino. If you're against a child who doesn't play more than 10% of hands, he's waiting for the nuts all the time, it's probably good just to get away. When he checks, go after him. There you go, job done. Literally, like, boom, there you go, there's your secret. It's not hard. In terms of rules and actual bullet points, I'm going to skim through these, and there will be a couple of spots where I will actually change this screen, and I will go over to a card viewer where you can actually see some examples of hands, so I'm going to show you. So again, this video might start, I'm not editing this, I'm just literally going off the fly. I'm guessing it's probably going to be roughly an hour, might be just over. I'm going to try and get it to less than an hour. I will do my best, but there is quite a lot of information here. I'm not going to sit here and do some 3-part series or some bullshit. I'm just going to get straight in. I'm going to be real blunt, I'm going to be real honest. I'm probably going to talk quite fast. I'm just going to get all of this out of the way. This document will be on my Discord as well. I'll upload it up there as well. I mean, you can copy and paste it, or you can just look at it here and copy it. I don't really care. But this is the shit you need to start doing, to be quite honest. So let's begin. So these are generalizations and somewhat subjective in their approach, but the actual base reasoning behind these is somewhat objective in a way. Like, these are basically facts but are put into subjective form. That's the biggest hypocritical thing ever, probably, but you see what I'm kind of getting at here. I will tell you to do something that will be subjective, but the reasoning is pretty damn solid. Like, and the kind of reasoning is pretty good, okay? So just to start with, let's just say, I mean, these are pretty generalized, but start bluffing more pre-flop. Extremely polar versus nits, very linear versus regs. We mentioned that originally in some of my previous videos. For anyone who does not know what that means, if you're against someone who's waiting for the nuts, right? They're opening early to mid position, okay? Bob's like old boy coffee Bob. He's been sitting there for 4 hours. He hasn't said a word. He's sitting there. Or you got some absolute donut sitting there playing Clash of Clans for the last 4 hours who hasn't played a hand. They probably have something a bit tighter on average than most players. So if they're opening early positions, for example, you don't really want to go after them that much. You want to kind of call a lot in position. You kind of want to have really fucking good hands. If you're going to raise those people, you kind of need to have it on the absolute spectrum, sort of top 4 or 5% of hands. For example, queens, kings, aces, ace king, ace queen suited to some extent. Okay, if you're going to find bluffs against them, you need the absolute polar end. Block the top of range, have a flush draw, have a large card. If they're going to continue with queens and jacks and tens and ace queen and whatever, we want to at least try and make some kind of top pair or flush or straight. Don't start 3-betting them with king jack off and on the button against under the gun, for example. Have ace 4 suited or aces. Really polarized. And again, against like anyone remotely normal to a human being, you can start playing a bit more. Again, this is pretty basic, but like you can, and then just go back to whatever your positions are. If you're early position versus early position, those suited polar blockers are good. If you're in medium to late positions, blind on blind, you start opening up. I'm not going to sit here in theory preach, okay, but I'm just saying, like, don't like be aggressive against these players but when they're opening in late positions, or if you've got super polar combos, okay, we'll look at some examples in a minute, okay, and again a bit more linear against the regs, okay. Get those offsuit Broadway combos more in there. Widen your ranges up in general. Start soft playing and having more calls versus nits. This is also the other part of the story as well. So imagine, let's actually bring up the other thing, which is Texas Card House Replayer. This is pretty cool. This is free. It's just a website, cardplayer.com. Texas Hold'em Poker Odds Calculator. For example, let's just say here is under the gun. A villain's got an opening range of something like this. I mean, ace king of any suit, whatever, it doesn't really matter. He's going to have hands like this. He's going to have, no, he's never going to have that. He's going to have a hand like this. He's probably going to have a hand like this. He's going to have a hand like maybe this, maybe not. He's going to have a hand like, let's go with Jack 10 suited. Everyone loves that. He's going to open a hand like maybe Jack 9 suited, maybe not. Who fucking knows? He's a child. He's a nit. Let's give him a pretty strong hand instead. Let's give him pocket eights and then one more for fun. There you go. 9-8 suited. Ta-da. This is like a pretty concise early to mid position open. If you would just go with 6 max for now, you can adjust this slightly if you're playing 8 max, 9 max live, whatever. 9 max live games, yikes, I don't even know what those are. Get them the hell away from me. 6 max is where the adults play. just kidding, but not. So early position, UTG, hijacker, both of them are opening. Both of them are like sort of 14% PFR or less. You're probably going to encounter 99% of these, maybe taking away 8-9 suited, maybe taking away pocket fives. Maybe their worst opening range is something like ace jack offsuit. I don't know. I'm just going with that. Okay, these are the types of hands they are opening. So why on God's green earth are you 3-betting them with a hand like ace jack offsuit, for example? I've actually run out of jacks. There you go. It's a bit of tilling. But, like, for example, a hand like ace-jack, or a hand like king-9 suited, or a hand like, I don't know, king-queen off, king-jack off. These are good hands to use as 3-bets some of the time in some positions. But against these massive fucking nits who just have really strong hands in these positions, you want ace-4 suited to try and fold out like ace-jack off or ace-10 off. There you go, that's what you want. Or ace-queen off maybe some of the time. You want a hand like king-5 suited to fold out a hand like ace-10 off, ace-jack off, ace-queen off, whatever. You don't want 9-8 suited. You don't want like all of these hands, to some extent, you actually want this entire range as effectively a pure call in most positions, because you want to dominate. I said this in the last video. You want to dominate their opening ranges, or you want to be pushing against it. If they're opening ace-10, ace-jack plus, you know, at least you can call in position, keep the pot small as hell with your king-queen suited, and when they check, you can attack them. When they bet and blast multiple streets, you can decide whether you're doing well against their range or you want to get out of the way. You keep it small, you keep it consistent, you play in position as much as possible, you keep the pots controlled, you bluff where you can in small situations, you absolutely squeeze them out of small and medium pots for value when they check or when they're showing weakness, or if you feel like you've just got a better hand than them, right? I'd rather flat ace king, okay, on the big blind against under the gun, okay? I'd rather flat this pure on the button with ace jack suited against the nit opening under the gun and hijack. I would rather wait for it to be ace high or jack high and then decide how much value I can attain from them dominating range, or if I can potentially bluff them with equity, whatever. All I'm trying to do is I want to be in position to them as much as I can. That is the priority. I don't want to 3-bet them with a linear range like all these types of hands. I want to just soft play the shit out of everything. I want to call with really good hands. I want to 3-bet with ultra good hands, and I want to find some ultra polar bluffs. So my bluffs are going to be hands like King 5 suited, for example, Ace 4 suited. These types of hands, these are the types of hands I'm looking for to some extent. Anything that can block top of range, it can make a top pair, it can make a straight or a flush, like, but not so good as in it does not want to get 4-bet by a nit and have to fold. Like, for example, Ace Jack suited, I don't want to 3-bet that against a child, because if I 3-bet him and he 4-bets me, or if he calls, I've filtered him so hard that his range that is continuing is often beating mine, for example. So again, I've lost him with all those hands I want to get from him, and when the times I am trying to get him to fold, I've got a hand that's guaranteed to be worse, if you kind of see where I'm going with this. So I'm not going to sit here and do every single position, but if you're against a regular opponent opens under the gun, for example, whatever, it doesn't matter what his hand is, you're sitting there on the button, great, have your king queen off, have your ace jack offsuit, then you have your polar range on top of it, then you can have a hand like pocket jacks if you want to 3-bet, whatever, like you can start playing more normal, okay, literally. But against these hyper nits early and mid positions, do not go after them at all. Literally, attack them when they start opening the medium and the late positions. Go after them when they're opening on the cutoff and you're in the small blind, etc., etc. Those are better spots to actually go after them. In terms of soft playing to the extreme, you can also, for example, depending on, I suppose this is more like 100. We'll keep this in the logic of 100 big blind strategy. But if your villains are opening really, really strong ranges, okay. If you're opening nutted end hands, so like let's give you aces, let's give you kings, let's give you queens, let's give you I'm going to take away jacks, I'm going to go aces, kings, queens, ace king, even ace king suited to some extent. If you open these and you get 3-bet by people who literally, and I'm talking like astronomically embarrassing players, like 14-11 twos and like 15-11 fours, things like that, like the extreme end, aces and kings, like I would just 4-bet and get it in every single time. However, hands like ace king off, ace king suited, pocket queens, pocket jacks, pocket tens, I would much rather just call the 3-bet. I don't care about like wanting to 4-bet and like protect equity. I don't care about 4-betting to maintain the betting lead. I don't care about 4-betting to attack like a range of hands and equity I can attack. I literally just want to dominate them and get the money in pre with the absolute best, as in literally aces and kings. To some extent, not even kings even. And I just want to, if they're 3-betting me with a hand like ace king off or like pocket tens and like ace jack suited, I kind of want to just call with my tens, my jacks, my queens, my ace king. I don't really want to 4-bet queens, get jammed on, or I don't really want to 4-bet, bloat the pot, and they flat their ace king. And then the board's a king high board, and I don't know if they're sitting there with pocket nines or king queen suited. I've got no clue. Does that make sense? Like, you don't need to play poker. You don't need to play balance. You just have it a shit ton. You keep the pots as small as possible, and you just win small to medium pots consistently. You don't make massive lines. If you don't have any idea how to bluff either, then don't go for crazy lines. But in general, you just kind of have to be very careful how you play against the nits. Against the regular players, you just literally go back to like sort of normal strategy. If you've got pocket queens, you're in a medium to late position or middle to late position, you're getting 3-bet. Yeah, you can just 4-bet for value and get it in 100, 120 bigs or whatever in most pots. You know, if you open like open under the gun, the big blind 3-bets, you're sitting there with jacks. Yeah, you're just gonna call, aren't you? Like you're just gonna play normal strategy. But like in terms of getting in like tens, jacks, queens, even to some extent kings, and ace king offsuit, and to some extent ace king suited, you absolutely have to know that your villain has a range of hands that can continue, that you are ahead of, that you actually will generate value. The idea in the low end micro stakes, I'm talking about the extreme end to start with, is when you're 3-betting these hands, like ace queen off, like you're just like, oh, I'm going to 3-bet ace queen for value. That's true. Even a nit will give you action with worse, like ace jack suited, ace 10 suited, king queen suited, whatever. But you're not going to generate loads of value from them post flop. They're not just going to call you with ace queen suited, ace high board, and then you're going to bet the flop, blast the turn, and go all in the river. Most of them aren't even going to call the river. And if they do, they pretty much have ace king and sometimes ace queen. It's on the extreme ends. It's just the regular players that may actually call properly. Like, well, maybe not even them, who knows. But like, you're not extracting the maximum money by 3-betting ace king and barreling and shoving the river and getting called by ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, whatever. That's not how you actually extract the money. Unfortunately, the game is not playing like that anymore. When you have a population of people who are literally just absolutely waiting for super strong hands and are so terrified to put a penny in the fucking pot because they keep getting shown the nuts from every single player in existence, they're in shell mode from the beginning. They will open a good, to some extent, at least some of the hands are supposed to, right? They'll open king, queen off, for example. But when they get 3-bet, they fold. Right, fine, that's normal. Anyone's going to do that. But what I'm saying is when they start opening hands and overfolding, and they start like sort of deceptively just calling 3-bets with ace king and kings and queens and stuff like that, then you're actually not making a lot of money. If you 3-bet and get called by these hands, you're not going to stack them either. You're actually going to win the same money and sometimes less by 3-betting. It sounds ridiculous and it's wrong in theory, but in terms of these nits, it's absolutely correct. So for example, I'm just going to give you like another option. So like what I want, right, is I want a nit, okay, to open ace jack under the gun as an example. I'm sitting here in the hijack with ace king, okay. I would rather, I'm using this as a vacuum, but like I would rather call in position then 3-bet them. If you're very deep, I would rather 3-bet just for value, okay? But like we're talking 100, maybe up to 150 bigs in general. Most nits have those kind of tiny gay stacks, and then they just fold them all, and then when they get to 100 big blinds, they rat hole. And I'm not shitting on rat holers, but I'm just saying they want 100 bigs because they don't want to play the game. They don't want to improve. They just want to have a set. They just want to have kings. They just want to flat with ace king against your 3-bet, and they just want to see if they hit top pair, and then they'll cool down and they'll tank fold and God knows what, right? Don't worry about them. Just exploit them and then fuck off to the next stake. And then again and again and again, right? So to do that, we just want to literally dominate their range in position as much as possible. And then when we hit a board like this, for example, there you go. They bet on the flop. We can just call. And they bet the turn. We can call. And then what they're going to do with ace jack, for example, is they're going to check this river. And then you're just going to make a nice large size and get called. That's what we're looking to do. You're not looking to raise the flop, bomb the turn, and then overbet, shove the river, whatever. You're not going to get calls. They're not going to call you. This is the beauty of it. You would rather have, to some extent, like a hand like king 5 suited and bet the flop, destroy the turn, and then blocking ace king, overbet, shove the river as a bluff. Because I guarantee you they will not call you with even a hand as strong as this to some extent. Because they know that when they get 3-bet, face a large bet on the turn, and face a river jam, their villains are just going to wake up with this. Like almost every single time they are being shown this. So against these nitty populations, you would rather literally just bluff and barrel and bluff and then go all in than you actually would for value. It's ridiculous, but it's actually somewhat like factual. The only other way that you can perceivably sort of get out of these stakes is to play like an absolute just swamp creature. He's lurking in the caves, waiting for the nuts all the time, and you're just not paying anyone, and you just put in a ridiculous amount of time, and you're just winning the absolute minimum, like, and you're just trying to like there's no poker to it, there's no skill, you're just sitting there. Like, I think the best player I've seen in 2NL and 5NL is just a complete child. Like, that they often beat the stake and they do what they need to do to beat the stake, but like their strategy is, I think they were literally, I think it was something like, I think it was like an 18 VPIP, but then the PFR was like 13, and the pre-flop 3-bet was like 5%. It was just like, what they're doing is they're not paying anybody, but they're not playing. They're literally just 3-betting like top of range, and betting and just trying to see if they can get called by and get scraps. And they are never calling. They are never bluffing. They don't really c-bet anything. They're just ready to fold, but they just don't really call or lose any money. But it's not even that is not the best way to beat the game either. Right, but anyway, I digress. Let's go back to this sheet. So let's go through this a bit quicker. That was with the examples, but like just quick examples. Like, you've got maniac players. If you actually have aggressive players, like bad, just spewy aggro tard type players, and they keep 3-betting you, and you find yourself in spots, they do exist, right? And you get sort of you're not sure what to do with them. Just a quick couple of pointers. 4-bet bluff them a bit wider. So 4-bet them with your like king jack offs, your king queen offs, your king 5s, your ace 5 suiteds, whatnot, and call wider. So like just call the 3-bet with like ace 10, ace jack, for example. Don't like fold or 4-bet. Like, you can even just call wider as well. Generally open, just tighter in general. like just to avoid it. And also just like kind of have an idea and a mindset before. If you know you've got someone who's free betting like 15% behind you, don't open like king 7 suited, right? Just fold. It's because you know you're just going to face a lot of action and you're just going to have to fold, right? Open your king 10 off or king jack off, but then 4-bet it. Great, there you go. Like that's kind of a good option, a better option. Carrying on, if you have a VPIP and PFR lower than 14/14, you really need to reconsider your life. Yeah, pretty much. You should be ashamed of yourself if you fall under that category, because hundreds of you will. Hundreds of you will watch this video, and I don't care if you've never played the game before and you're literally learning what the hell to do. If you have a VPIP and a PFR under 14%, I have no interest in you. Like, you are hurting the economy of this game at any level. You are just a brick, a potato. You don't make any money, and you're just an annoyance, to be quite frank. Also, one for all you GTA solver nerds: if a player is not approved in your solver, who gives a shit? If you're playing 2NL up to say even 100NL to some extent, if you're playing against like regular fishy players, and like most of the regs at a lot of these levels aren't even that great either, then let's be honest, like why the hell do you need to apply? Like, solver stuff is great, I love solver stuff, but what I'm saying is, like, if here's an example: you're playing 50NL, you're against like an ABC average reg who's probably beating the game for something like one big blind per 100, maybe less, or maybe even losing but winning through rate back, whatever. That opponent is not gonna. You do not need to apply super death advanced strategy to beat him, because they're just going to be very ABC with their style. I'm not saying people can't play the game like to a good standard, but what I'm saying really is just like 25NL regs, 50NL regs. If they're stuck there forever, and this is going to sound really nasty and entitled, I'm going to sound like a complete asshole, but if you're stuck on a certain level for a long time, there's a fucking reason for it. And it really, like, let's be honest, like, if you can, like, there's no one in 50NL that's going to death crush the universe, because they would just go up higher. If there's no reason or logic to it. So, like, the best thing you're going to encounter are people who are just playing. Like, yeah, they can check raise and have some semi-bluffs. They can barrel and they can bluff some rivers. Great. They can check raise and do the stuff. They're going to be a little bit better with their sizes. But what I'm saying is that there's nothing super advanced that you need to beat these players. If anything, it's just a case of, like, being indifferent versus them, or maybe attaining a small win rate and just focusing on the fish. But, like, you don't need to have, like, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of solver study. And you do not need to focus on being like somewhat like balanced or protected with your frequencies, and just talking about minimum defense frequencies at like 25NL, thinking about like having correct balance, like bluffing ranges and frequencies at like 10NL, 25, 50NL. It's a load of shite. Like, it's good to absolutely understand what combos you should bluff with, because that is exploitable. It's really good to not 3-bet like less than, say, 5%, because that's pretty damn exploitable. It's really good to not win on showdown like 90% of the time, because you're probably quite exploitable. Do you see? But like, that's all common sense. Like, that doesn't really take any rocket science for people to see that you're 3-betting. To see that you're shoving top of showdown range with any suit going with no blockers 100% of the time in all positions. That's pretty exploitable. But you don't really need to even be super advanced to beat them. Don't focus on what your HUD. Focus on what your HUD data is saying. Focus on what your players look like in front of you. This is for micro to low stakes. I'm not talking about like I'm not saying I play like 200 online Zoom, because I don't, right? But I'm just saying, like sort of a micro to low, and to some extent breaking into a mid stakes level. So like you're playing like up to say like 100 or breaking into 200. That's where you really need to start being quite honest and careful with how you're playing. Like, I know it's quite basic and quite generalized to say that, but it's a fact. Anything below, like, let's be honest, right? Like, you need the minimal amount of work. You need a shit ton of common sense. You need a ton of mental game. You don't really need massive amounts of theory. You don't need massive amounts of like really, really, really solid study. You're probably just making loads of really dumb, obvious, stupid decisions. You're probably just calling way too wide. You're probably making really stupid combos to bluff with. You're probably just absolutely ignorant to how people actually play. You're probably folding way too much. You're probably getting bluffed a shit ton. You probably have absolutely nowhere near your actual frequency of bluff that you're supposed to have. If you're not check raising all in and getting called and you don't have it, you are not supposed to be a winning player, to be quite frank with you. Like, you really need to understand and identify, like, really, you absolutely need to find some bluffs. You absolutely need to find some folds. You need to actually realize that maybe you're not that good. I'm just going to be honest. Like, everyone makes mistakes. I make tons all the time. But let's be honest. If you are kind of sitting there going, I always run bad, I'm really unlucky, these fucking nits, they always do this, and blah 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 blah. Who gives a shit? No one wants to sit here and listen to you rant. No one wants to sit here and listen to you complain. Why should you want to either? Right? Stop finding problems and start finding solutions. Get coaching, go start studying, or literally just have an absolute think. At the basic level, record your sessions, right? Have a look at how you're playing. And that's at the basic level without any theory at all. I guarantee you, if you literally record your sessions with yourself talking to yourself, like with you talking to yourself, like on a YouTube video, for example, but just don't upload it, just stick it on like OBS and just have a look on your desktop, whatever. You can just, I guarantee you there'll be spots where you're just like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you choosing that size? That makes no sense. No, this guy's got it. Why are you calling? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that's the most basic thing you can do, and it makes a difference immediately. Use your HUD info. I mean, we've gone through that's pretty obvious. Start down betting for value. So in general, this is just, again, a generalized thing. Your strategy against fish and your strategy against sort of calling stations and pretty terrible sort of whaley players, when you have it, you should be betting big. Nothing else to say. But however, when you're against these nits and the regular players, you want to start incorporating sizes. For example, you open pocket queens, right? The board's ace high. You want to start just like, you don't want to check this. You want to bet between 10 and 20% and start getting value from worse pocket pairs. You want to protect a little bit of equity. You want to get a bit of protection against like king highs. You want to get a little bit of value from worse pocket pairs. You want to just absolutely just make the game easy for you. Like, for example, there's nothing stopping you from getting 3 streets on an ace high board, or even an ace king high board with pocket queens if you go 10% 3 times. It's a fucking thing. If you get to the turn, stop doing these stupid massive sizes. If you're on a board where you have value and you're in a 3-bet pot, an ace high board, you bet the flop, you get to the turn, you're sitting here with ace queen, ace king, or a bluff, a good combo to use with blockers. Yeah, go big on the turn. But what I'm saying is, like, when you get to river, stop going bet into large, into shove, unless you're against either a normal player, a whaley type player, or a fish or a recreational who you conceive that might actually call you. Because against the majority of players, then overfolding, which means you want to be over bluffing to some extent. They're undercalling, which means you want to be downsizing your value bets, which is ridiculous, but it's just absolutely a fact. So for example, like going like 10 to 30% on flops, downsizing to like sort of 50-60% on turns, getting to rivers and betting sort of 60 to 70% on the river. Stop trying to get this massive James Bond style 3-bet into overbet, into shove, or like huge and then into huge again, because these boys are not calling you with one pair enough of the time. You actually kind of need to get into a situation more often where you're winning a guaranteed smaller size in higher volume rather than a knockout like punch and just doubling through someone in one hand. It's not going to happen enough of the time. If you're against the people you perceive as actually like being able to call either correctly or just incorrectly, then get the value from them. But in general, against the nittier, tighter players and the weaker regs, they're not going to pay you. They're going to just overfold and fall over when you're bluffing, which is what you're kind of going to be starting to look at. On the flip side, stop binning yourself with dumb fuck Pega sizes. That's not very. It's quite a weird way of saying it, but it's literally just. Let's be honest, right? Stop pot. Like, I see all these people who, like, the flush comes in and they lead pot on the turn, or like it goes check on the turn when the flush comes in and then the guy just like pots into you on the river, or like I'm not talking about solver strategy, I'm just talking general. If you know your opponent's not that strong and you river a good hand or you turn a good hand, like, stop going massive. If a turn is quite bad for you, say for example you've got 2 black kings and a flush comes on the turn in a 3-bet pot, stop betting massive. Like, go smaller or check, for example, right? Like, actually try to get value and absolutely stop just going to a size where all you're going to do is force better to continue, or you get bluffed by like equity, by a semi-bluff, for example. Like, just, you have to start being careful with the sizes you're choosing. Small to medium sizes more consistently. Get called more often. Literally, it's really annoying to say it, but it's pretty much the way the games are going. Okay, a few things to be careful of when you're playing against really tight players. Okay, just a few things, a few flags, is when you're against a really tight player. And this sounds really obvious, and this should be something that most of you will already kind of have figured out. When an absolute stain on the game is potting it and barreling multi-streets with large sizes, especially pot to overbet, that's when you want to be fucking concerned. Your overpair is not very good. Your bottom 2 pair is not very good when you're getting check raised, when you're getting potted into, when you're getting overbet shoved, when they're fake tanking. They're sitting there for 20-30 seconds and then go all in, right? It's just disgusting. Get away from these nits. Do not call these super large sizes, okay? As we just said, like, this fake tank is a thing that I've noticed on GG, when these stains absolutely, they sit there and they do this like fake tank thing where, like, they do it like they open, they get 3-bet, they tank for about 15 seconds, and then they click you back. It's just aces or kings almost every single time. When you get check raise, they think about it, then they check raise you, and they just have it. Like, literally just it's so easy to just consider, like, just get the fuck away from them instantly and show them every single time you fold. Literally, I'm literally doing it where I'm showing like, for better or for worse, I'm showing every single stain on the game every time I bluff them and every time I fold a monster, every single time, because I want them to be irritated. They're sitting there for hours waiting for the best hands. Fuck them. Like, you must, like, get them riled up, get them angry, just irritate them, because they deserve it, to be quite honest. Bully them. They don't deserve to play. When you've got things like top pairs and over pairs and you get raised by these nits, again, like, there's no such thing as, you know, oh, he could have a draw, he could have this. If you're against super tight players, you just need to identify that, really, honestly, being bluffed for a tiny pot on the flop is way better than just stacking off against these guys. Like, to be quite frank, like, the absolute stains on the game, if you're against a 15-11-3, and, like, you get check raise and there's, like, semi-bluffs on the board, you're probably just better off folding kings. Like, you're probably just better off folding. Because there you go, you lose, like, 1 bet pre and 1 on the flop. And that's better than literally stacking off against indifferent equity or being miles behind 7, 8, 9 times out of 10, right? When their check raise frequency is mostly just, like, the nut flush draw with 2 overs, or a set or 2 pair, or, like, a straight flush combo draw, for example. This is one big thing, is you need to bluff/turn hands into bluffs wherever possible. Okay, we'll do some more examples now in a second. What I'm saying is, when you're getting to flops, turns, and rivers, and you're getting there with, like, bottom pair and a straight draw, you're getting there with, like, bottom pair weak kicker, you're getting there with a gut shot on the flop. A lot of the time, like, this is more of a theory thing, but you really want to start considering just going back into the aggressive side, jumping over the top of people. One thing you'll find even nits do, this is across the board, this is probably on any stake, but like stakes on no stakes, especially weak players, hard stuck players, nits, fish, regs, whatever, they just want to fucking bet. They just want to they just bet and bet and bet and bet and bet, and they just don't stop because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know why they're c-betting. They don't know what size they choose. They don't know why they're doing anything. All they know is they go big when they have it because they want to get called. And then there you go, we move to the next hand. There's nothing to say. You need to, like, kind of identify when these boys are just c-betting at, like, 80-90% frequencies, which often they are, to be quite honest. You absolutely need to start check raising, because all they're going to do is they're just going to c-bet like 90% of the time, and they're going to just continue barreling with any 2 overs, and then they're going to probably give up on the river. So what you want is really strong calls. And you want loads of check, like loads of hands, like weak 1 pairs that are going to auto check fold the turn 9.5 times out of 10, right? Unless you make 2 pair or trips, and then you check raise and they fold anyway. You want to just bluff almost immediately, literally. You want to have top pair turn to gut shot, right? On let's say the ball. We'll look at examples in a second. I'm just saying off the top of my head. When there's 3 to a straight out there, and the guy's betting on the turn for say 60% or whatever, you've got third pair and a gut shot blocking the straight. Right? You want to start check raising those types of hands instead of calling them, right? Top pair and so on are a little bit different, but like, say for example, you get to the river, you've got like a medium pair type hand and a draw, your draw misses, but a flush comes in and you've got the king of hearts in your hand, as an example. Villain checks to you. This is a really good spot to just go all in. And that's exactly what you would do with the flush as well, for example. So let's look at some examples on the Texas again. Where am I going? Here we go. So for example, let's say... I don't know, let's say like the, what's a good example, I suppose? Let's go with under the gun first, I suppose. It doesn't matter what they open, right? Ace is their range. We're in the big blind. We defend a hand with, like, by a call. I don't know, let's give ourselves a really strong pre-flop defense. There you go, king, queen off or something like that, right? No, actually, I'm going to go with, let's go with king, jack off. There you go. Decided flat this time, 6 max, whatever. Here we go. Flop comes something like... I'll tell you what, let's go. Let's keep the king jack. There we go. No, I don't want a flush draw. I want something like this. Yeah, this is a good example. Okay. So we've got like bottom pair and a gutty. We check villain bets. Doesn't matter how much they bet. They block, they go half, whatever. Fuck them. Doesn't matter. They bet the flop. Here we are. There's nothing wrong with making a call here. That's fine. But we could also just consider check raising. We block ace king. We block a set of jacks. We block king 10. We can absolutely represent king 10, right? If they're going to bet a hand like ace 10 here and have to fold, that's great. If they bet a hand like ace jack, you check raise the turn, they call, brick on the turn. We bet large, they call, brick on the river. We just go all in. It doesn't end. We literally just check raise, representing a straight, representing a set of queens, bet big on the turn, jam all in on the river, see you later. Even if villain's got a hand like this, for example, you would actually be surprised how much villain might even consider overfolding this. Okay, I'm not saying they will and you're not targeting that, but what I'm saying is a hand like ace king, a hand like ace 10, a hand like ace jack, a hand like king jack, a hand like king queen with like a backdoor flush draw, right? That may pick up a flush draw on the turn, for example, right? Like there's a lot of hands that villain will get to the river with that will fold, and that's what you're kind of targeting. Other examples are things like when you've got flush blockers. So for example, if you're let's say we're in the defense again. We'll go with big blind. It's the easiest example. No, let's go with something like this. There we go. That's a good example. Okay. Then the board comes out. Let's say king of spades. King for this. Okay. No, actually, I'm going to go with another example. Let's give ourselves a 10. Bonk. We check, villain bets, we decide to go for a call. 5 of spades on the turn. This is a really good example. We check, villain checks back. Okay, nothing else to say. Okay, pretty easy. Now, the villain is, the river is going to come a brick. Okay, well, perceived brick anyway. Villain's got pocket sevens, rip. We check the river, because we've got showdown value. There's no point in bluffing this. Like, this is just a check. Nice and easy. Ha ha ha. However, now, villain goes back to value bet the river. So again, they go third, they go half, they go 60%. It doesn't really matter. What you need to identify is what do we block? We block ace king, which is one of their big hands. We block pocket aces. That's a pretty good hand to block. We block pocket tens. That's a pretty good hand to block. But what's even more important than this? We are blocking villain's absolute top of range of shit tons of combos. We are blocking all of the nut flushes, right? So say, for example, villain, let's just, for the sake of argument, he's got a hand like ace king or aces, right? With, you know, he bets the flop, he gets called, he checks the turn, back, and then we get to the river. Facing a check, he then goes for like sort of 40%, 50%. Doesn't really matter, to be honest, at this level. We don't want to call anymore, because if you're against these weaker, tighter players, they don't check back and then go back to bluff the river. They thin value bet, or they check, like their thin value bet is like king queen here, right? And then, or they check. It's just that simple. We're going to check back. They're going to check back jacks and queens. They're going to check back king jack. They've got a hand like ace king, king jack, maybe king queen. Some of the time they're going to have like maybe king 10 that got scared. It doesn't really make too much difference, because all you're going to do is you're just going to make a massive check raise for like 5x pot. There you go. Boom. You decide. I block millions of fucking hands. You're overfolding. See you later. Like, this is a good option to have. And then guess what? We also just have it here a bunch as well. Because if villain did decide to trap us, for the sake of argument, oh, okay, that's a straight flush, that's ultra trapped. For the sake of argument, let's just give them, say, like the queen jack of spades. They can have value and traps to some extent as well, but they're not going to have them. They're not going to have them. They don't check back and trap shit like this. They're just literally going to bet this for value on the turn, right? Some stupid massive size. That's all they're going to do. So what's likely most of the time going to happen is you literally can just use these blockers as powerhouse bluffs. And guess what? You just have the same value as well. You want to be finding as many situations as you can, okay, where you can literally lead or check raise or play aggressively. Let's say the button opens. Again, it doesn't matter what the button opens. We defend the big blind. I don't know what a good example is. Let's say something like 4-5 suited. You really want to be 3-betting this at a good frequency. Fuck, it doesn't matter. We call. Here we are. Let's go with a board like this, I suppose. Let's go with something like this, and then a weak under pair. There you go. Bonk. So what we've done, actually, I'll tell you what, let's be a little bit more generous, is give ourselves a backdoor straight and flush draw as well. So we've picked up bottom pair, shit kicker, with a bit of backdoors. Here we are. Villain. We checked the villain bets, say for the sake of argument, half pot, or most likely just a third, because that's what fish do. They just bet tiny, don't know why. They bet a third, even though it would technically be correct here. We get here 5-4 suited. Standard play, you do make a bunch of calls here, because there's no real need to turn your hand into a bluff. However, if what's going to happen here is villain's going to just over c-bet any part of his range. And then just decide to blast the turn okay, for the sake of it, which they often do, to be quite honest. They love doing this 1-2 check line. All you're going to do is you're just going to check call the flop, check fold the turn. How familiar is that's the word, familiar? How familiar does that sound to you? Where you check call the flop, check fold the turn. Check call the flop, check fold the turn. Check call the flop, check fold the turn. Check call the flop, they check back the turn. We check the river, and we check fold the river. Like, right? Again, and again, and again, and again. And you lose, and you lose, and you lose, and you lose, and when it goes like this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and eventually you get a really good hand, you check raise it, and they fold. And then you check call, and then you check fold. And then we turn trips, and we check raise, and they fold. And again, and again, and again. And you wonder why you don't get out these stakes. Well, how about we say fuck you, and we're going to check raise, and see you later. How about we say we're going to check raise, and we say see you later. Again, and 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 again. And all of a sudden, you start becoming a winning player. Easy peasy. Now, when you get called, that's what makes the game difficult. And this is the part of it where I say, unfortunately, the rabbit hole goes way deeper than this, is when you do check raise aggressively and you just get called by a really good hand on the flop and you don't turn anything, and here we are, right? For example, I'm just going to use this as a clear example. Because you've got absolute bottom of range, so blocking a set of fours, there's nothing wrong with you potentially overbetting this or mostly checking, just as a quick example, right? But because you check raised, you're kind of filtering your villain's range to absolutely contain hands like this more often than not, right? So villains' continuing ranges are going to be very, very strong on average. So you want to be careful about not just going, just going to check raise and it's going to overbet the turn and just going to overbet the river, do this every single time. Yeah, they do overfold, but you've got to be careful when you're check raising people and barreling multiple streets when their ranges could potentially improve. For example, villain could easily have a hand like these, for example. That's a bad example. There you go. Like villain's range can somewhat improve as well. Okay, there's nothing stopping villain from actually making a somewhat correct call with a hand like 2 overs, backdoor flush draw, straight draw, for example, as well. But for the sake of argument, what I'm saying is, in general, is not so much considering the turns and rivers, but is looking at these types of mindsets on the flop. Another one I'm going to quickly do while I've got you is, for example, when they're opening early position, it doesn't matter what their range is, you defend the blinds. Stop fucking calling weak hands. Stop defending Jack 10 off. Get rid of that shit, especially in high rakes. Get rid of like Queen Jack off. Right? Get rid of it, okay? Villain opens to 2.5, you need to be really, really tight. Villain opens to 2, okay, fine, you can start defending wider. However, you've got like Queen Jack off and stuff, like get rid of them. Don't, stop defending wide against an early position who's really fucking tight in the first place, and then you just get spots like this, and then you go, well, I've got top pair, I have to call. Then the turn just comes like dust, and then you check, and they bet really big, and you go, well, I've got top pair, I have to call. And then the river comes, you check, they check back, and we just lose. Like, right? Like, or they get to bluff us on the river, okay? Or they get to value own us. Like, we don't really know, to be quite honest. We're not sure what we're up against whenever. Like, that's what you have to be somewhat aware of. It's like, what you want to be doing is you want to be in the driver's seat. You want to be value betting, or you want to be bluffing. You want to try and be one-sided for the value, the other side for the bluffs. Excellent. We're knocking into each other and getting value out of these spots. And in between these two, like, giant fists, try not to be really, really dodgy here. In between those two giant iron fists, two wrecking balls, is the call button. And this call button needs to be absolutely taken away from the game. Because as soon as you start calling down these super tight players with perceived calling ranges and minimum defense frequencies and I've got to defend the top pair, this fucking cunt is sitting there with a really good strong fucking hand and he's just going to beat you. There you go. And if he's bluffing, he's probably just going to keep bluffing. Again, subjective, but pretty true. Like, if population is over c-betting and then barreling too much and overfolding to check raises, why are you calling with a weak range? Okay? It's the same thing, which I'll quickly go over now, is when you have hands, right? Let's say you're opening the button and the big blind defends. It doesn't really make any difference, right? But for the sake of argument, all right, maybe not 10-9-5 suited. There you go, 10-6 suited. There you go. Meh. Probably don't even call that because there's stains. There you go, 10-8 suited. Whatever, it doesn't matter. We open the button, big blind defends. Here we are. Flop comes something like this, maybe this, and I don't know, this. No, let's not. I don't want to pair them up. Let's give them this. No, actually, we need to give them some equity, don't we? Let's give them a guttable. Yeah, a guttable would be nice. Let's give them a jack. Bonk. An open-ender. There you go. Makes sense. They check the flop. Well, if we want to have some checkbacks, We're not trap. We don't want to be in a trap mode. When we've got value, we want to blast. However, this is a board where it's like we're really far ahead most of the time, but we've got the type of hand where if you could also attain some sliver of value to some extent by also checking back and inducing villain to then start blasting the turn. We call, just give random brick, river villain then may bluff the river. We call, and excellent, we've generated 2 values of bluff equity, like from villain, okay? Yeah, they had a hand this time, but there's nothing stopping them from having complete air either, to some extent. Do you kind of see what I'm saying? Like, it's also the same when you have a hand like King Jack. Now, when you start climbing above like 25 and 50, some of the regs will identify that you're checking back way too often, as in your ranges are always capped, as in you are never checking back a hand like ace 10 plus here. You're more likely to check back 10s and jack 10 and like king queen and like maybe ace 5 suited. So against like kind of spewy fish and to some extent the weaker regs, it's good to have these check back some of the time. And it's also good to bet them sometimes. When you start going against the people who actually have somewhat of a brain, who might exploit you to some extent, even the tiniest amount, that's when you do want to be careful that you're not always checking back. Because your counter strategy is also to really kind of like identify, this is another thing. So say, for example, you've got just, I don't know, let's give you something like 5-4 suited. There you go, you defend. Villain checks back a hand, like, let's say this is a weak tag, okay? They check back a really capped, unprotected fuck-off range, brick on the turn. Their check-back strategy is designed to keep the pot really small, and then when you bet the turn, that kind of like 2/3 size, they go, cool. And then we see the river and play from there. Now, what you do to counter that is you say, fuck yourself, mate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to overbet the turn. Hi. Now, all of a sudden, these hands that look real kind of like, haha, I'm going to call the turn. No, I really don't really want to call the turn. Right? They want to actually start overfolding. Well, overfolding. They just want to start making good correct folds, to be honest. But if you go like half pot here, if you get, this is the Pepega size. If you go like third pot, half pot, right? You wouldn't do that with a set of 9s. You wouldn't do that with like ace jack. You wouldn't do that with like ace 10. You've got a good strong range here. You don't just have like king jack to bet the turn. You're doing tons of really strong checks. Because remember, you can also just check a hand like this. Okay? And then villain might actually start betting correctly himself and we beat them. Right? But anyway, for the sake of it, you have these checks. Sorry, villains have these capped protected checkbacks. Your sizes on turn should actually be overbets out of position versus like most positions when we're on these sort of like Broadway boards, especially double Broadways. Like ace X is a really good option as well. Check raising is not as great on the really large boards often because we don't really have as many of the nutted hands. But on turns like this, for example, like let's just say we've got a hand like a low flush draw. We don't want to check call this. We don't want to check fold. We don't want to check raise even because there's no point. Because if I check this, I've checked twice and allowed him to check back, and also double checking. If I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't really do that very often with value, for example. It's just we don't want him to check back twice and then call our river bluff. What we want to do is overbet right into this cunt and go boom, and then he goes ah, and then literally that's exactly what I do with my value as well. And then we get to the river, right? So you want to absolutely attain fold equity with these overbet sizes. You don't have to even be bluffing. Guess what? You can actually have it as well. Haha. So you are allowed to do the same thing with value, okay? But these are a couple of these kind of exploitative examples, and to some extent not even exploitative. Half of this is actually GTO, really, and just general game theory. Stop fucking check calling bottom pair and check folding the turn. Find some check raises. Stop making wide, weak calls against really tight players. Stop over bluffing pre-flop with crappy linear ranges. Call them more in position. Dominate their ranges. Attack them when they check. Attack all the capped checkbacks from nits and tag regs. So you've got no balance of protection whatsoever. Just because you don't worry about yourself that much. You're worried about how they're playing, especially at all these levels. Even at like 50-0 and somewhat 100 and so on, you just have to just literally say to yourself, this is the guy in front of me. This is how I'm going to exploit you. I know if you've got a good, strong fundamental strategy that you study behind you, even better, you're even more prepared. Your arsenal is even stronger. But essentially, most of it is still just going, I've got a really good hand. I got loads of money. You just want to go, okay, well, I'm going to fold then with this good hand that doesn't beat you. And then the times you've got a hand that blocks all their best hands, knowing they overfold, guess what? You're going to blast into them and then just take the small to medium pots. Take the red line, take a bit of blue line, and just kind of steady, and then get the hell out as soon as possible and shock take to the next stake. Stop sitting here waiting for really good hands, thinking that you have to sit there and play 10% of hands, have kings and aces to 3-bet pre, have a set to check raise. That's all bullshit, man. Like, that's 20 fucking years ago. Like, the games are not like that anymore, okay? Like,
hell no, to be quite frank. Right, let's skip through this ASAP to get the hell out of here and get this finished. So I'm going to change the screen that I am on. How do I do that? There we go. Right, we're going to sprint through these and then we're done. Okay, I've actually gone through half of these with those examples. Bonk, 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 bonk. Where are we? Here we go. You have top pair or an over pair and you're getting raised by a nit. In brackets, I can't fold. He could have a flush draw. I can't even spell. That would probably help. If you keep saying to yourself with these one pair type hands when nits check raise you, I can't fold. I could be exploited. He could have a flush draw. He could have a draw. Stop calling. Fold. Move on to the next hand. Super easy. If you bluff/turn hands into bluffs wherever possible, check raising bottom/ mid pair, check raising blockers, barreling equity rather than check calling it. Stop check calling bottom pair. Stop betting and then picking up like fourth pair and checking back, right? You pick up a flush draw on the turn and check call and shit. Like, just keep going when you pick up equity. Just keep barreling, okay? Really, really good, especially when you pick up the equity. If you don't pick up the equity, you should really just give up often, okay? Just generalized. Check calling weak top pairs / medium pairs to induce / exploit weaker player tendencies to bet flops. Basically what we said with those examples. Like, instead of check raising a really, really strong hand, like, allow villain to not overfold against you with their bluffs and even their value, to some extent. Do loads of flop and turn check calls. Don't do this shitty nit thing that they check call the flop and then check raise the turn. That's the most retarded thing in the entire game. Everyone knows that someone who check calls the flop and then check raises the turn absolutely just has it, okay? Check call the flop into check call to the turn into check raise river, or check raise the flop like he would do with the draw and then barrel the turn and then barrel the river. At least do something pretty normal rather than something stupid James Bondy. Right, stop doing these stupid massive check lines or check call flop into check raise turn. This is ridiculous. Start putting your villains to the test. So you need to start finding it to some extent. You can absolutely abuse this in terms of like overfolding. When you're bluffing, overbet. Keep doing it. Overbet the turn. Overbet the river. When you're checking and check raising, raise massive for value and bluffs. Right? When you've got it and you feel like there's not many hands villain can have, go smaller. When you've got it and you think villain's got loads of hands that they can call, go bigger. When you're check raising and you've got it, go bigger. When you're when you're bluffing, right, you must always pick a large size. It doesn't have to be an overbet, but generally, like studied or not studied, overbetting as a bluff is just the most powerful thing at micro stakes and low stakes. That's the thing that you'll need to be careful of later on. But like, people will fold. People will overfold the shit out of any size. When you start overbetting and they call, that's when you need to pull up. But generally, like, people will overfold everything. And to be fair, like, most of the people who overbet at those stakes, I mean, when the nits are doing it, they tend to have a really good hand. So be careful. There are a lot of regs who follow a similar line, though. So you want to be a bit careful against certain player types. And this is quite, again, generalized, but just true. Like, there'll be a lot of people who will be extremely weighted towards either value or bluffs. It'll be one or the other. It won't be like a hyperflux balance. I'm going to be honest, right? If you watch any of my streams, I will do tons of 10% sizes for value. I will do 10% sizes as a trap, and I will do 10% sizes as a bluff. Most people who bet really small on the river, say 30%, they're just value betting, but thin. Or they think like, you don't have a good hand, I'll go small and try and keep you in. Or like, I've got pocket kings and it's an ace-high board, we check the flop, I'll bet small on the turn. Or they bet the flop, they check back the flop, they go back to bet the turn, whatever. They're not bluffing enough of the time. They're value betting, but they're not thin value betting wide enough in the first place. They're not like, you'll just see all these fucking nit papegas that are just checking back ultimate hands that should just be value bets. But because it's second pair to the board, they're like, oh my god, I have to snap check back because I won't get called by worse. Well, actually, you fucking get called by everything if you bet small enough. But what I'm saying is, when you realise that populations don't have these sizes, like, stop calling all these tiny sizes as well. But when you're bluffing, just go massive most of the time. And start trying to identify, if you get overbet and you have a good hand to call and you see that they're bluffing, mark them, because they are capable of overbetting as a bluff. Really good information to know. And often they're probably doing it too much as a bluff as well, which is good when you know about it, but it's something you should be doing yourself, to be honest, as an exploit. So we start finding these larger sizes, overbets, especially when we're bluffing. And stop using weak sizes to get zero-fold equity / generate minimum value. When you're betting big on the river, you're going to get maximum value and maximum fold equity. That is a thing, okay? Stop betting half pot on the river when you've got a really, really good hand. Or if you're turning a hand, like if you check call the flop and then you turned a gut shot and like bottom pair, check raise big and then overbet shove the river, because that's what you do if you had a straight in the first place, right? Because you were so polarized. You don't do this crappy half pot size and they go, oh, it didn't work. They called with like middle 2 pair and stuff. Yeah, because you only went 2/3 on the river. How about going 4x pot, all in shove? There you go. You decide. Right? Like, that's a decision that you've put your villain to. Not going, a bit half pot. They tank called top pair. Oh, I knew I shouldn't have bluffed. Do you know what I mean? Like, that sounds all too fucking familiar for most of you. Okay, I would not be surprised. So, carrying on. If they don't call 3 streets, what do I do? Consider trap checking turns and feigning weakness. So, for example, like, it doesn't matter if you open or 3-bet, any scenario. Let's say, okay, I'll give you a good one. We open, a tight player opens, we 3-bet with, say, ace king. Okay, it's like a king high board, ace high board, whatever. Okay, maybe an ace high board. They check, we bet like third pot, half pot, doesn't really matter. They call. There's nothing stopping you sometimes to check back the turn. Then they can bet the river and then you can raise, right? That allows them to have bluffs and also kind of gives you the opportunity to do something they're not used to. So maybe you get a call, because most of the time if you bet 3 streets, you like, especially for good sizes, you don't get called often either. That's subjective to the villain type you're against. Okay, when you're against a reg, when you're against an ATM, when you're against like a kind of general fish, you want to just be blasting 3 streets and get maximum value and not fucking around. However, when you are out of position, so for example, let's just say you 3-bet in the small blind and they call in any position. All right, so hijack, for example, they open, you 3-bet small blind, they call, you flop like middle set. Okay, you check raise the flop, they call. Excellent, really, really good for us. Sometimes you can just check the turn and then double check raise the turn. And guess what? We would do that with some semi bluffs and picked up equity on the turn. Why can't I have a gut shot flush draw? Why can't I have medium pair in a flush draw? Why can't I have an open ender in a flush draw? Why can't I just have a naked gut shot with 2 overs? Whatever. At the same time, there's nothing stopping you from check raising the flop and check calling the turn into river check and allowing villain to just like think, wow, you just don't have it, I can bluff you. Or they can value bet worse. And then when you jam the river, they give you even less credit as well. Perfect, because they never see it. They're not exposed to it because no one's doing anything remotely strategic. And this is what I'm saying about like 50NL regs, 25NL regs, and sounding like an entitled cunt, but it's just true. They're not doing these check overbet shoves. They're not doing these massive check 300% overbet sizes. Their check raises are like 3x. Yeah, they're like tiny sizes. They don't have these like pair and gut shot blockers enough of the time. It's literally just 3-bet a good hand, bet 3 times, or 3-bet a hand with 2 overs blocking top of range. Maybe they bet 3 times. It's just the standard ABC shit over and over again. Like, oh, you check raise a flush draw and you bet the turn. Good for you, right? Like, that's about as scary as it gets. So I wouldn't worry. You can consider soft playing. We said this at the beginning, but soft playing ace queens, ace king, jacks, queens by flatting more pre. This is against the ultra tight opponents. Okay, so for example, if they're overfolding ace queen, ace jack, and stuff, and they're not full betting you, and they're not like people who like open the top of range. When you've got the absolute part of range, you want to 3-bet for value most of the time. But against the like this is where it becomes a bit of a subjective thing, because I don't want to tell people to flat ace king, for example, in all positions all the time, and then just get minimum value out of like ace queen, whereas they could have got 3 streets, or they flat queens. Okay, let someone else come in with like 7-9 offsuit, for example, and then they lose a big pot, or they like, you know, what I'm saying is though, like, let's say you've got an ultra tight opponent opening under the gun and you're in the big blind defense, or you're on the button, you've got ace queen suited. A lot of the time, just flatting there, same with jacks and queens some of the time, and ace king, I would say mostly ace king off, but to some extent both suited and unsuited. Calling and keeping villains wider ranges in is somewhat more profitable against people who kind of overfold. And even if they call, like say they open ace queen suited, they call your 3-bet with ace king, the board's like ace high. Against like the recreationals, the fish, and the weaker players, it's still really hard to. You've probably noticed this. It's very difficult to actually really stack someone for like 100, 150 bigs, because they're going to guarantee call the flop. They're going to guarantee call the turn with like ace jack, ace queen, and then they're going to tank fold ace 10 and ace jack if they get there. And ace queen's going to kind of start becoming indifferent, whether it's deciding to like maybe call, maybe fold. This is the thing. I'm not being funny, but I know a lot of people in the pools who either watch my videos or see me play, and they've seen me bluff, and they've seen what I bluff with and how I bluff it. They know that I'm got overbet bluffs. They know that I'm check raising and turning hands into bluffs. So a lot of people may be biased and say, well, I can call you down. So for example, it's better for me personally. But most people, you're probably going to find that you don't really get this big stack off very often. It's more a case of like they open ace queen, you flat sixes, the board's like ace 10 6, you check raise, they call, they turn top 2 or whatever. Like it's shit like that where you're stacking people. what you don't realize is most value in this game, unless you're playing against extremely bad players, right? The powerhouse comes from, like, I'm not saying you don't go to 200 and L and just have this death red line, but what I'm saying is that the micro to low and somewhat mid stakes, the red line actually is quite prevalent. It's quite strong if you actually do identify that you can turn hands into bluffs against people who overfold, and you can do it with basically immunity, and you can overdo it more often. You don't have to roll frequencies. You just go, I know it's going to work 9.5 times out of 10, so it's immediately profitable. That's way more important than studying fucking minimum defense frequencies and a load of shit like that. Okay, you can really, really run these bastards down, and then at the same time, when you do win all these small and medium pots, you then keep your winnings without throwing them away by calling with medium hands. And then on top of that, your blue line then comes from cold decks, and it comes from small to medium pots where you're just kind of grinding. Yeah, 3-bet a good hand. I bet I got 2 streets. Maybe I got 3 streets. Won like 50 bigs. Excellent, great. I stack some with a set. Excellent, great. Okay, you want to flip. Excellent, great. But like your blue line, where you're just stacking people with the top of range versus top of range, isn't going up like this. It's staying like this. It's indifferent. Most people pre are getting it in with ace king and kings and aces and maybe queens, whatever, but then so's the other guy most of the time, so they're just locking horns. No one's really winning in that environment. When people start like having 4-bet bluffs and making you fold more, that's when they start pushing over the edge and get more value from you. But then also the times you're bluffing into nits who kind of have it more often, they start becoming more value, getting more value out of you long term. But what I'm saying is the money is mainly coming from the small to medium consistent pots, the cold decks when they happen, the flips when you win them. Like, again, that's still pretty indifferent, but these like red line spots, red line small to medium wins, blue line small to medium wins, and occasionally a big win, right? And then also hanging, like when your graph is going like this, you're hanging on to that value. It's not going like this and then suddenly going like this a bit because you made a bad call, then it's going up and then it goes down again because you made a bad call, and then you lost a flip, and then you ran in, and then you lost 2 flips, and then you ran into it, and then you made a bluff that didn't work. Like, that's going to happen like this, but it's going to keep climbing, right? When you keep making the bad calls, when you start bluffing with shit combos, that's where you start sort of dipping down. When you start getting it in with queens pre, blind on blind, 150 bigs against someone who you know is probably not got worse than, say, queens themselves, it's not really a good idea. You could have just called their 3-bet, for example, right? Kept in there like pocket 10s and jacks, kept in there like king queen or their ace queen, whatever. You can dominate their ranges and make more money from them. That is extremely exploitable strategically later on. But for micro stakes and low stakes and breaking into mid, like you must over bluff, you must overfold, and you must kind of like admit that you're just winning small to medium pots consistently, and that's the only way to win, right? Like most of the time, until you get like an actual like human being that you're playing against to some extent. Let's get this out of the way in the next 10 minutes if we can. That'd be great. Against tighter early and mid positions, ranges 3-bet less unless against tighter early / mid position ranges, 3-bet less often because they are strong. Yeah, we went over that already. Attack later positions more instead, and then obviously we want a really tight polar range. We already covered that. That's done. Weaker defenses pre need to be tightened up. Fold more of your big blind defense and 3-bet bluff more. But 3-bet bluff more with the polar end of hands. Yep, that's fine. We covered that. Attack the overfolders in the blinds and re-steal a lot versus late position opens. Very, very, very quickly. Okay, let's quickly change this back to Texas. You need to start identifying, and this is something that you can't do unless you study, right? I'm not going to start telling you to 3-bet 5-6 suited. I'm not going to start telling you to now 3-bet against the button with a hand like this, okay? This is something you can do and should be doing. You can start 3-betting the big blind with a hand like this against the small blind open. But you shouldn't do it unless you study it, unless you practice it, unless you apply it. So I've got really, really itchy earlobes. You need to like study that shit because you're just going to blast into bad pots and you're just going to spew money. But what you can do is you can immediately identify that when someone opens on the cutoff, right? Just give them an ace, it doesn't really matter. You're sitting here with a hand like king jack off. Some of the time you can 3-bet this. This is not a hard hand to 3-bet and play post flop. You've got a hand like king queen suited or whatever. You've got a hand like king 10 off, ace jack off, ace 10 off. Like some of the time you've got the medium connectors and you've got some suited broad raise. You can find some raises sometimes, right? If the button opens, you're sitting here with say like 9-10 suited. Guess what you want to do? It's not cool. You're actually prioritizing 3-bet pre because you've got 10 high, you've got 6 high, you've got 7 high that can flop equity but doesn't want to rely on having to call out position and make a hand to then check call or maybe check raise and just hope that they fold. Do you see what I'm saying? You're setting yourself up for disaster. You don't need balance, you don't need a range construction, you don't need frequencies, you don't need minimum defense frequency. Jesus Christ, just saying it is boring. It's just, you literally just need really good cards or good blocking property cards. If an aggressive regular, for example, opens on the button, like there's nothing stopping you from just calling ace 5 suited. You should call, like, you know, some of the time. But a hand like ace 4 suited, ace 5 suited, you know, you can 3-bet these some more of the time, right? You got some of these like little blocker offsuit combos. Like these are really good combos to start 3-betting against the when you're out of position, okay? When you're in position, you actually would prefer to call these types of hands most of the time, like these offsuit marginal broadways, because they dominate the small blinds opening range, which is going to like consist of a lot of junk, right? It's going to consist of a lot of, like, the small blinds are going to be opening hands like 10-9 off, right? Well, I don't want to 3-bet king 10 off and fold out 10-9 off. It's the same principle as an early position opener opening a really tight range and you flatting a strong range in position to them. So then when the boards don't come out how they want and then they find checks, for example, let's give you a slightly weaker combo. There you go. And let's put a diamond on the board for simplicity. Let's say an alternate opens under the gun. Literally give them ace king. Right? Literally give them nines. There you go. Those are their two hands. We've got ace 10 of diamonds. They check the flop. Here we are. Well, to be honest with you, you're better off just going ahead and betting. There is no reason to talk about strategy. But what I'm saying is there's nothing stopping you from just winning this pot later down the line. Let's say it check on the flop. Then he checks the turn. We go ahead and probe. Maybe he calls one. Checks the river. We bet again and then go see you later. And then, you know, do you see what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing stopping you. Like, that's the type of situation I want to put myself in, rather than say 3-betting ace 10 suited and then either getting 4-bet or jammed on or called, right? This is what nits love to do, is they love to pure call like these types of hands instead of like having any frequency of any other play, right? And then what happens is you then get into situations where you've 3-bet a hand that the chart tells you to 3-bet, fine. Check. Here we are. Right? And if you check back, they start bombing the turn. Now we have to call. They bomb the river. Now we have to call. We lose a big pot. Whereas what we could have done is we could have, for example, right, given them the option of having a hand that would have folded, but didn't because we 3-bet, we flattered in position. And the times they have a good hand and blast multiple streets, we can maybe call 1 or 2 and then get away and not lose too much. And we know we can like at least make some money that way in position. And the times they give up or like don't have it, we can bluff them and do whatever later. But also what you also do is you allow them to technically have worse hands. So for example, let's just say they bet the flop with king queen, we call the flop, and then they just check the turn. You know, like here we are. Like you kind of avoided situations where we could have got like re-attacked or we refilter them. But also we can just generate value from bluffing them. We can generate value by saving money instead of just having to 3-bet fold or just get ourselves in situations against a very strong overfiltered range. Or we can just allow villain to have bluffs with a worse hand that we can call against. For example, you see? Like, to some extent, that's just a better exploitative way of playing against most of these players. You want to have the best hand or you want to control the size of the pot and then just win all these small to medium victories when they just get outplayed post. We're not paying them. We're going to bluff them, and we're going to value bet them against them, and we're going to get away with a bunch of hands that we would normally have as calls. But we're going to find folds against them. Like, that's how you make money. Often it's just by small to medium victories and saving the profits you make by not giving them back with giant calls. And I'm somewhat hypocritical because I'm still calling ridiculously good hands, and it's just unfortunately just a clear mistake the way some of these stains are playing. So the last couple of points, and then we are finally done, is moving on. Here we go. Attack the overfolders. Yes, don't be afraid to bet and barrel equity. We said that already. You free bet ace 10 off, you get called. You bet like overs and a backdoor, they call. You pick up a gut shot. Like, you don't need to worry about what your suits and your blockers are that much at micro and low stakes. Okay, you're just relying on like a lot of flop and turn over folds, and then sort of over giving up rivers after you've filtered villains. That's kind of what you're mostly doing. Sometimes you'll find river bluffs, but generally like you pick up a flush draw, or like a flush draw develops and you've got like a combo, an offsuit ace combo with like the ace of hearts on the second heart turn. That's a good combo to keep going and then bluff jam a heart river, for example, right? Don't like check call and then do all these don't give up if you pick up perceived equity or a perceived improved range. Like, keep going. They always bet when I check, what can I do? Well, guess what? You can have some protected fucking checks. How about, right? This is baffling that people don't understand this. Just because you go check, that doesn't mean that you're done with a hand. Just because everyone else doesn't mean you have to. Why don't you check and induce villain to bluff? Why don't you check and induce villain to bet worse? They're going to overfold the turn if you bet. Well, why don't you check? I check raise the flop with a set, and then I check the turn. That looks weak as hell. You think that looks weak as hell. And instead of you overfolding turn or only calling one street and then folding the river, actually you just blast the turn and go all in yourself with the hand you think is winning. Or you bluff, like with like a flush draw that missed, for example. It's just giving options, giving other avenues to win the game. Fish, weak players, they love to attack checks. And I know I tell you to attack checks as well. But what I'm saying is, you know, you're checking for a reason, and it's like, it doesn't have to be protected, but it's just a case of there are checks in there that will induce bluffs and attain EV from other avenues, rather than just sort of going and see if they win, right? Because that's not really how you play the game, to some extent. Increase your opening ranges with suited ace, king, and queen X. That's really important. I would rather not open king jack off under the gun, and I'd rather open a hand like king 4 suited, for example, because it's just got better properties. I will open a lot of those hands because I feel like I can make EV from them. I'm just saying, I just feel like I have an edge where I can bet and get attain value from them, even if it's a very minute amount of EV. Excuse me. Also, just because it's fun and I want to play, to be quite frank. But if you're generally like trying to get out, then what you want to stop doing, and this kind of comes into this one as well underneath it, is you want to consider rake and EV of hand selection. I'll go over this in a second. And you want to reduce the amount of small pocket pairs, weak to medium connectors, and then weakest unsuited broadways from early ranges. So for example, what I'm saying is, if you're under the gun or in the hijack 6-max, you want to start toning down like if, I don't know if you studied GTO or not, but for example, you open under the gun, right? This is subjective to what your rake environment is, but like let's say you're playing PokerStars, right? You've got queen jack off under the gun. It's something like a 50-50 open, right? Give or take, okay? And it's technically like an indifferent open. You don't really make EV from opening it, but your range construction requires you to have those combos of queen jack in there. You open 5-6 suited under the gun, that's not going to attain you EV. Neither is pocket fours. But you need them in there some of the time because you need them as part of a range. Because if you get to the flop and the board's 4-5-6 and you're in 3-bet pots, for example, and you don't have them when you open and call a 3-bet, then you can get run over. That's something for another world, right? Micro to low stakes, that doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is, like, you don't need them in your opening ranges. If you offset that couple of percent VPIP or PFR that you lose by not opening them, and just have a few more hands like king 4 suited, king 5, king 6 suited, right? Have them more often than those other combos. If you actually study, you'll actually see that you're actually technically not even making money by having these opens. You can argue that you can make money versus some humans in reality, but you even won't. If you open deuces through 5s under the gun, in any environment, you shouldn't really make much money anyway. And all that's going to happen is you're supposed to fold a bunch to 3-bets, depending on what your strategy is anyway. But like most of the time, you wouldn't open them often, and when you do, you call a 3-bet, or you don't, or you mix the 3-bet, whatever. Sorry, you mix the defense. But regardless, I'm going off course. Is you don't like why open 3s? Why open 4-5 suited when you know you're not being exploited? You know that you don't need to open them for range construction. And I need these hands in my range or I'll get exploited. Like, fuck off. Do you know what I mean? Like, what you want to have is just queen 10 suited, or like, let's say like open your under the gun range. Have like queen 9 suited or queen 8 some of the time. Maybe have like jack 9 suited some of the time. Now open up a hand like 10-9 suited some of the time. Now maybe open up king 4 or king 5 suited some of the time. Do you see what I'm saying? And that will offset the percentage. That hand is better blocking properties and will play better post flop than 4-5 suited will, or pocket fours will anyway. Do you see what I'm saying? If you get 3-bet, who cares? We've got a shit hand, right? Like, it doesn't matter to some extent, right? So those all come together, but there's something very important and should actually be really implemented in your games. The only reason I might open a hand like deuces through 5s, or like, a lot of the time, is where I'm in a whaley game and I know there's a lot of like, or I know there's loads of nits that are going to fold, for example, or I can just outplay them, or that with the whales behind, I know that if I open 4s, I'm not going to get 3-bet often. They're going to call wide. But if I flop a set and they flop any piece of anything, I'm going to get a lot more than I'm supposed to, right? So that's also one thing. And if you've got a bunch of nits and you've got the offsuit linear broadways, queen jack off, king 10, whatever, if they're overfolding and under 3-betting, then you can attack them wider and have them, but you're still not making tons of money, okay? Drastically reduce the requirements to cool down, like, this should basically, what I'm saying, I've kind of put this wrong around. I should say increase here. you should drastically increase the requirements to call villains down. So what I'm saying is, instead of going, oh, I've got top pair, I have to call, I've got this, I have to call, and blah, 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 blah. Most of the time when you're against these tight-knitty players, you actually just have to overfold. We've said it 100 times, but stop putting yourself in situations where you think, oh, the solver's telling me to call, or I've got top pair, so logically I have to call, right? Just get away from loads of hands. Be bluffed a bunch, because it doesn't really matter. You'd be surprised how little you're being bluffed anyway, and the amount of times you do get bluffed absolutely gets offset by the amount of money you save by the times you are getting value owned, to be quite frank. You value bet you value bet hard and fast when you have it. No trapping, especially versus nits, because they usually have above average strength when they want to put money in, and we can extract value. I mean, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? If we're against fish or against nits, we always generally want to go big, unless you sometimes, it's not even trapping, but you're just checking. Maybe you check raise a set and then check the turn. Maybe you 3-bet the flop and then check the turn as a trap with top pair. You'll do it sometimes, right? Just because, you know, if it's a wet board, you may be able to induce. Maybe if it's like a tight player, you feel you won't get a lot of streets of value, you know, maybe sometimes you can do it, but generally you are just betting big for value. And do not pay. Like, do not fucking pay. If there's a close spot in your opinion, it's just going to be a fold. I would literally say that. If you've got a spot where you're not sure, you feel like maybe you have to call because of X, Y, and Z, you think they're probably a tight player. I keep referring to that phrase, but it's just true, right? If you're against a decent reg, someone who's shown you bluffs and you've got a good hand, blocking value, and unblocking bluffs, and they have the bluffs, then maybe you need to call some of the time, right? If you're beating some of their value, then you absolutely have to call often, right? That's the way you should see it. But against the rest of the children, just get the fuck out of the way. It's not worth it, to literally be quite frank. I've just I've used this for example, but getting bluffed here or there is 1,000 times better than it's 1,000 times more profitable than making close cooldowns versus absolute fucking states. Couldn't have been said better. And finally, you fold everything as soon as possible versus nits. You have a marginal hand versus a nit on the turn. Whoever folds versus aggression. Try attacking instead. Like we said earlier, turn hands into bluffs. Find excuses to turn a hand into a bluff. Just find a reason to bluff equity. Find a reason to consistently barrel equity when you pick it up on the turns. If your range gets stronger on a turn, if you look scary, if a scary card comes, you don't have to have it. You don't even have to have the blocker. Why can't you check call bottom pair and the turn brings 3 to a straight, or it brings like 3 to a flush, or it's a monotone board and you've called with middle pair, no kicker, and the 4th spade comes, for example. Why not lead the turn as a bluff? Like, why not check raise as a bluff sometimes? There's nothing stopping you from finding these spots. You're in 3-bet pots. You got an underpair. You open 7s and you get called. You get 3-bet. You decide to call, right? The board's like, I don't know, like, let's just go with like Queen Jack 5, right? And villain like bets the flop. Why not check raise some of the time? You got 2 overs in the backdoor straight draw. Why not check raise some of the time? Why not raise some of the time? You've got showdown with Ace King and Ace Queen high in 3-bet pots. Well, guess what? In 3-bet and 4-bet pots, right? Ace King and Ace Queen on these like boards where you're blocking top pairs actually is some of your best candidates to barrel with and blast with, to be quite frank. In single raise pots where ranges are way wider, that's where showdown value is way more important, right? Sometimes you even bet with Ace King and Ace Queen and single raise pots for value because you've got the nut high cards, right? But anyway, that's something for another day. Ran over. Details of the Discord and the Twitch and everything are in the description below. Please like, please comment, please backseat me, please add information. I don't really care. I just want people involved. Press the like button, press the subscribe button. It helps me out a lot. Join the Discord. Check out my Twitch. Give me a follow on Twitch. Say hello. Backseat me live. I stream at least every other day at the moment. Really enjoying it. We'll be doing tons more. And for the love of God, if you're a nit, fucking change it or I will find you. See you later. Goodbye.